back. Is that better?
It's about the same. I would suggest maybe just speaking up a little bit and trying to
Okay.
balance it out that
All
way.
right. I'll project. I'll project.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Okay. Give me one moment. I'll be right back with you.
The Concerned Clergy invites you to their weekly town hall meeting on Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM.
All right. And 5, 4, 3, 2.
Well, we want to welcome everyone to the Concerned Clergy radio show on this evening. I'm Reverend Tony Alexander, and I'm joined by the president of the Concerned Clergy, Pastor David W. Green Sr. And we're going to have an opportunity on tonight to bring on a candidate for the the governor of Indiana. And you will have the opportunity also to call in and ask questions, provide feedback with your thoughts are in regards to the state of Indiana and what a governor can do for you, as well as you can comment on our Facebook page and our feed there. You can go ahead and comment there, and you can call in to the station. That number is 317-239-1310. Let us pray. Father God, Lord, we just want to thank you for the opportunity to be with you, Lord. We pray for our time, for our guests, and for our listening audience. Lord, we just ask that you lead, guide us, and direct us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Once again, I just want to say welcome to the Concerned Clergy Radio Show, and let's go ahead and bring in our guest for tonight. We have Miss Jennifer McCormick. How you doing, Dr. McCormick?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
All right. And you have announced your bid to be the governor for the state of Indiana. Pastor, we know there's a lot going on in Indiana in so many different areas, whether it be education, whether it be health, whether it be economics, you look at the infrastructure, what's going on in that regard. We talked about Medicaid last week and what's going on there. There's so much that I would say folks are looking for leadership from. And we're hoping Ms. McCormick can share on tonight maybe a pathway that she has that can maybe be conducive to correcting some, I'll say, the ills that we're seeing, Pastor.
Oh, without a doubt, and I'm excited to have Dr. McCormick with us. I want to kind of begin this conversation with just last week we had iLearn scores come out. And I know she used to be the superintendent of education, so I'm sure she took a peek at what's going on. I really want to begin with that topic of education. Dr. McCormick, tell me, what are you thinking as you see the latest iLearn scores and what's going on in terms of education across the state of Indiana?
Yeah, again, thank you for having me. Having been a teacher in the classroom for decades and an elementary principal and a local superintendent before I became the state superintendent, obviously education is incredibly important, and with an emphasis on public education because many of our kids are attending our public education schools. But the iLearn scores that came out were very concerning. I know we're coming off of COVID. I know that impacts learning performance. Also impacts our behavioral performance. It impacts dynamics, our health. And so there are a lot of pieces to that, but we can't ignore the results. And so we have a lot of work to do. We need to make sure we're at least addressing the data, which I know our local schools are doing, but our state house needs to have an honest conversation about the resources that are necessary. We are expensive. Education is over half of the state's budget. We understand that, we recognize that, but I would argue, is that enough? You know, we have a lot of districts out there with a lot of concerns that it's going to be expensive. However, I see that as an investment. We're either going to pay for that now as an investment, or it's going to be an expense down the road and it's not going to look good.
Yeah, I was having a conversation on today with the individual. We were talking about pre-K, and the individual was sharing how we need to focus on the long-term results of pre-K. That you don't try to judge that by the third grade only. You look and see what happens as a result of children who participate in pre-K at year 15, and the results we're talking about the data shows it's overwhelmingly a wise thing to do in terms of pre-K for our children. And as I looked at the I Learn scores, I'm concerned as well because how do we have a viable workforce? How do we catch up? Because the numbers were, in my opinion, abysmal compared to where we need to be.
Sure. And, in Indiana, we have had over 2 decades of really an experiment in education. And I would argue it's time that we really take an honest look at what are some of the results that we have gotten from that experiment. It's been expensive. It's had an impact on losing educators and losing faith in education with our families, also sending mixed messages on the importance of education. But instead of looking at education K-12 and, like you said, a snapshot in time in the third grade and call it a day, we really need to back it up to make sure our families have affordable and accessible childcare, universal pre-K, so when they do come into K-12, that there's a level of readiness that we're not having a conversation about third grade reading, that our students are better prepared and our kids have a viable options down the road. And so there are a lot of conversations that need to happen, but there's got to be a willingness to be honest about it, and also to, again, put the resources in where they need to go so that we're taking care of our families and taking care of our kids.
That sounds really good. That's something we definitely need to do, Rem Alexander, in terms of focusing on education. Obviously, we're not getting the results from what we've been doing, and so we do need to do that hard reset. You've often called for what you call a moratorium
For a
on
moratorium on
charter,
charter schools, exactly.
so we can evaluate. So we can evaluate. Not saying we're anti-charter, but evaluate what's going on so that we can put the money in the right places and improve education. We know we got some good charter schools, we got some good township schools, we got some good public schools, but we also got some bad ones in all that whole mix as well. How do we get on the path of uh, quality education, accessible education for all children? And I do believe this, Dr. McCormick, it will start with leadership. We're not getting there unless whoever is at the helm of the ship for the state of Indiana is saying this is something that I want to see.
Yeah, and I'm not alone in calling for that pause on the moratorium of expansion of choice. Again, we've done it for over a decade now. We've got data. So why are we not taking a deep dive looking at that before we invest further funds? You are exactly right. There are some good charter schools. There are some charter schools that need work. There are some great public schools, and there are public schools that need work. There are some good private schools and private schools that need work. And I would say the same thing with our homeschool population. Some do it well and some need a lot of work. And so, but we have so much data. And as a taxpayer, we should all be concerned about where that money's going and how it's being used to ensure that we've created a system that's best for kids. And some of that deep dive may be making some really hard choices, but we owe it to kids and we owe it to families to do that. And that requires a pause. And Indiana's not alone in that. Other states are doing it and saying, what we're doing, is it working, is it not working? But our communities rely on that. We are at a pivotal point as a state that if we don't, we're going to continue to lose the very educators that are in our classrooms that we rely on for the future of Indiana. And having been a teacher, I know it's hard. Sometimes it's thankless. Other times it's the best job in the world and it's extremely rewarding. But until we take care of the system, we are still going to struggle to have people who are willing to come into the system and commit what is necessary to be great for our kids.
Because we've got to have those teachers at the helm. Because one thing for sure is if we're going to change it, it's going to be the teachers, right? Because the model, what we do know works, if you've got great teachers, you're going to get great outcomes. And you have to have those great teachers in the classrooms and them having the resources that they need to be successful.
That's right. And it also takes, obviously a willingness for all educators and all leaders to respect parent rights. And I don't think there's many teachers out there that would say, we don't agree with parent rights. We don't want parents involved. We beg for parent involvement. We beg for community involvement. The supermajority puts rhetoric out there that teachers are pushing back on parental rights, and that's nonsense. That is not helping the situation. So, we respect parental rights, and that's the only way we're going to get stronger. And we need to take a look at, again, the data, respecting the parental rights, and making sure we're respecting the very people who are doing these really hard jobs.
And the other effect that you see there as well, Dr. McCormick, goes with the teachers' unions also are now dismantled. Even transportation in a lot of the cases, especially in Marion County, you'll see that being disrupted as well. All of that has a trickle effect in other areas in regards to education.
Yeah, it sure does. And, let's talk about mental health. I mean, so much of that is even, addressed in our schools, and community safety, and making sure we're getting to know our kids and getting to know the dynamics of the environments in which they live. There are so many pieces to education that we need to really focus in and pay attention to, that it's critical. So, all things lead into education. Until we're having, again, an honest conversation with a focus on that, we're going to struggle.
Well, let me ask if you have anything else on education, Pastor, that you would like
No,
for. Okay, because last week we had dialogue in regards to many folks that are falling off the rolls in regards to Medicaid. That's a huge issue as we're seeing some practices that were done a few years ago as far as notifying folks that they may be losing coverage, individuals getting those notifications, getting them in a timely manner. There's so many issues as far as even being to identify the piece of mail, things such as, that nature. What are your thoughts as to one, the number of people that are rolling off, and then two, how can we better communicate it, especially with something so important as Medicaid?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's concerning. It is. There was a lack of information and a plan, in my opinion, to make sure that people were prepared and had time to react. So the whole notion that it's actually happening, and then the lack of supports as a fallback, are all concerning. As a whole, our healthcare system in Indiana is woefully underperforming, in the sense that access to affordable health care, and then when there are programs to support, and how do we make sure we're embracing those programs, but also how do we transition Hoosiers to, if they're rolling off, how do we make a transition so that they have the support they need? A lot of that, 100% of that, is leadership. And we've heard from people year after year in various states that healthcare concerns are a huge issue. Part of it is communication, and that starts at the local level with support of the state level. And until we have a collective effort, and I know people are working really hard, but there's got to be some streamlining to that. I felt that firsthand when the schools were calling me about COVID. The communication in some of our areas was very broken, and we needed it yesterday, and it was very slow, if not just non-existent. And so that communication piece needs to have to come obviously from that local level, but it's got to be better coordinated. I give many of our local health officials a lot of credit. They're doing really tough jobs, again, with a lack of resources, but it's got to be a priority. And until it's a priority, it's not going to get the attention that it needs, and it's not going to get the system, one being in communication, that it deserves.
How do you see yourself? You're the governor. How do you look to change some of these things in terms of communication to make it much more effective than what it is today?
Yeah, for one, we've got to talk to folks who are in the trenches. We have to talk to those who are being impacted. We have to also talk to the professionals in the healthcare field. And stop ignoring Hoosiers and stop ignoring experts. And I've seen it time after time, session after session. There are solutions if we're willing to sit down at the table with people, bipartisan, common sense, with civility, and come up with these solutions. But, as a governor, they have the agencies, they have boards, they have committees, and just that alone should be a big piece of sending nothing more than just a message of communication is going to be critical, making sure we're taking care of Hoosiers and empowering instead of suppressing is going to be incredibly important. But there are mechanisms. I know the authority of our governor is somewhat limited, but there are ways that the governor can, if nothing else, he's got the platform at this point to be a voice. And so when I win, I will use that platform in a positive way in order to empower Hoosiers and in order to make sure we're taking care of our families.
That's good to hear. Alexander, one of my, it just happened was the governor put in place a task force to look at health in Indiana. There was some of the best and brightest minds we have in the state of Indiana, across the state. Dr. Box, the whole gamut. And then the legislative session says Senate Bill 1, that's going to be the most important. Our House Bill number 1, it's going to be the most important. We're focusing on health. And, they're asking, I forget the exact number, like $300 million. And it gets cut to $100 million, but it's over 2 years, so it's $50 million a year. When they came with the data that says this is what we need to impact the health system, health of Hoosiers across the board. We had some of the best people working on this committee. And basically, somebody says, we'll just ignore what they said. Here's a number we're willing to give you. And when you think about it, we're going to, in the sales piece of it, if you will, well, you got $50 million. But that's woefully short of what was needed to address what is documented facts in terms of the health of Hoosiers and where we're lacking and dealing with disparities, a whole number of issues. And yet we don't have the resources matching that. Why did you have a group go do all this work, put all this together, if you were just going to ignore them? If you're not going to listen to your own experts, why do you have them working on this stuff? Because there were meetings on this stuff. They were meeting consistently on it, working on a plan. Here's what it takes, answering the issues. Then we get to a legislative session, and you just basically throw all that out.
Yeah.
If we have the experts, as Dr. McCormick said, well, you got to at least listen to them and try to be in the ballpark, not just be like, that's nice all that time y'all spent, but here's what we're going to do. We just don't think all that's necessary, and not give sound reason why you're dismissing it. Not because they have some solution. It's just but wait a minute. We empowered these people to do this work. They should have been supported, in my opinion. And that goes back to leadership.
And we've seen that time after time after time, where there's extensive committees, there's extensive boards that have been developed. They work really hard and put some really good ideas together and submit them formally, and they are ignored. And we've seen it over and over and over, because when you have a supermajority, many people know that there is no reason to compromise. There's no reason to listen. There's no reason to not, take advantage of campaign initiatives and agendas and big dollars. And when that happens, that impacts our daily lives as Hoosiers. And although it's great to say we're putting together these committees and we're putting together these boards and we're bringing everybody to the table, if you ignore them, you have just wasted their time. The other thing is a budget reflects priorities. And and everybody that's paying attention just witnessed how that budget came out. And I know we're sitting on a huge surplus. And I also know you can't spend it down to zero. But there are a lot of people, including our employers, our employees, our families, our medical folks, our schools, that are telling us we are in a mental health crisis. We have got to prioritize access to care, quality services, and just an honest conversation about what's happening now and what we can expect going forward, because I don't see a quick fix to this. But throwing a relatively small amount of money at it, although I'm happy there was some funds put toward it, you are absolutely correct that it's woefully underfunding the need. And I've heard it over and over. Our employers, I think, are going to drive a lot of this because they're getting noisy. They need employees. And if they can't get those employees back to work because of whatever the medical reason or mental health or substance abuse from Hoosiers, then it is really difficult to operate as a business. But again, we need to put the resources toward it, honest conversation, bring those folks to the table, but listen to them and respect some of the solutions that they have come up with.
We need
Thank
to let's go ahead. We need to take a break, but let's go ahead and get this caller in before our break. Let's go ahead and bring in Larry.
Yes, ma'am, Miss McCormick. Did you think that if we took our kids out of school for 2 years, that they would get better or worse? And also, I'm surprised that you're not talking about property tax caps, which is the reason for the misfortune of the common school system. Now, you're in there talking about doping up these kids, right, and spending $300 million to do it, rather than training them for a skill so that they can do this labor work. Nobody wants you on their job after you have a mental illness diagnosis. You should know that. But with the schools, you should know that Mitch Daniels destroyed our Constitution. Corporations no longer fund operations and buildings for the common schools. That is why they're closing them down. That is why they have vouchers and so forth. That's going to catch up sooner or later. Not one candidate can talk about it. I've seen the whole process.
All right, hey Larry, Larry, we're up against a
So,
break.
you know,
We're up against a break, so let's go ahead and take our break. And then Dr. McCormick, if you'd like to simmer on that, then you can respond after our break. But you've been listening to the Concerned Clergy Radio Show on AM 1310, 92.7, and 95.1 FM. The Light. Welcome back to the Concerned Clergy Radio Show. I'm Reverend Tony Alexander, and I'm joined by the president of the Concerned Clergy. We have Pastor David W. Green Sr., who's joining us. As our guest, we have candidate for governor of Indiana, Dr. Jennifer McCormick. And I know, Pastor, you've got some things that you want to ask our guest, and we want to make sure we get some of those questions in. But once again, we have, if anybody wants to call in, you can call into the radio station, 317-239-1310. You can also comment. You can put your comment in our Facebook feed also. Pastor Green?
Yeah, I wanted to ask Dr. McCormick while we had her here to make sure that we had adequate time for this. There was a recent article that came out July the 14th by CNBC where they talked about America's 10 worst states to live and work in for 2023. And Indiana made the list and was number 7. And so, as a governor, there's number of things that we've talked about education a little bit. And we talked about this mental health piece. What would you do as governor to address this so that we're not on this list and certainly not going towards being number 1 as the worst states to live and work in? Because that's important.
Yeah, so the study that came out had a lot of pieces to it, and a lot of those pieces were concerning, from the education to the healthcare to environmental, and the ratings for, or the rankings for all those areas were concerning. And to some of us, that's not a surprise. We've been seeing those go down over years, and we're not seeing, an increase in most of those areas. I'm extremely concerned that what the report reflected was, we went from 35th in an education rate ranking to 45th. Some of them are bottom 10 in the nation. Some of them are bottom 5 in the nation. It all goes back to policy, and policy reflects priorities. And priorities obviously are dependent on leadership. We are who we vote for. So the only way to change the direction the state is going toward is to elect people who are concerned about education, who are concerned about our air and water quality, who are concerned about accessibility to healthcare, are concerned about protecting our rights and our freedoms, who are concerned about the economy and make sure that people have affordable housing, to make sure we have good paying jobs. It is, and safe communities. I mean, that played into that study as well. But we need to say, where are we falling in these areas? Where is that conversation? Why are we worried about banning books and litter boxes during a session when we have national rankings that are so concerning for not just today, but for the future? I'm a mom. My son's in the military. He's 25. He's an officer, a cyber officer. And I want him someday to at least consider coming back to Indiana as a state he would be proud to live and raise and have a family and raise children here. I want that for him. But I'm hearing from so many folks now and so many young people that, one, they're embarrassed, they're frustrated, they're scared. That is unacceptable. That is not the Indiana we should settle for. And I refuse to do that. And that is why I'm running. And I know there are so many Hoosiers out there, regardless of political affiliation, that are over it. We know we deserve better than those rankings. As a governor, again, there are boards, there are committees, there are agencies, there are times that you can work with the different chambers. There are policies to fight for. There is a platform to fight for. There's also, how do you prioritize some of the dollars that flow through with what the governor uses? And so much of that goes back to, we have got to prioritize what matters. And that is for the health and well-being, making sure we have an educated populace, and making sure that our families, our kids, we live in a state that we want to come back and be proud of, and that we stay here. That's part of the problem too. We've got to make sure that we are providing a state that people want to, not only they're living here now, but they want to stay here.
Yeah, you don't want our best and brightest. We have some of the finest universities in the entire country, but you don't want them all to graduate and leave.
Absolutely.
That's not wise, in my opinion.
And I'm in so many high schools, I'm on so many university campuses, and I hear it over and over. And our young adults from that 20 to like 30 age, where I'm hearing it from so many people, the same message is, I can't believe we're in this situation. I hear them say, it's embarrassing. They don't even like to watch social media from what some of the things that come out. They don't like to watch the news. They don't like the direction things are going in, but they almost feel powerless. They feel hopeless. And I said, your power, your hope is in your vote. It's in mobilizing and voting. It's getting behind great candidates from the top, not just the top of the ticket, but all the way down. Get behind those folks. Go work for those campaigns. Donate what you can, but go vote. Indiana's voting record is dismal. And I think it's dismal because people feel like, what's the point? Well, the point is, if you don't go vote, we get what we get. And we deserve better than that.
And clearly, in my opinion, if we don't want to stay on that worst list, we've got to go vote because we have to send a message that we don't want to be on that list. We want something different. It's not that we don't have the intelligence in the Hoosiers. We do have the intelligence. It's about time we have to go vote and send a clear message. We need to focus on the right things. We don't need to focus on book banning. That's not why we're on the worst list. We have a number of areas, whether it's in mental health, education, etc. We need to improve in. That's not finger pointing. That's just the reality of where we are. We've got to do a better job in areas, and that's crime, that's health, that's education, that's economics, that's lifting up job wages for people, making companies be successful and want to be here. Because if we continue to stay on this list, on the worst list, then you can't be surprised if some of our larger companies in the future say, I don't know if I want to keep my headquarters in Indiana or build or do things here. I might need to do that somewhere else because we can't. It should not be our objective to stay on this list. We need to be focused on the things that will move us off the list and not just people's pet projects maybe.
Yeah, and I also am concerned, obviously Indiana is impacted by national politics. You can't escape that. And under President Trump, it was a tough 4 years for everybody across the nation. But through that and coming out of that, we have a lot of work to do as far as in that article that you referenced, it talks about the inclusivity of a state. That means how inclusive are we of each other? How much respect do we have of each other? How much are we willing to work with each other? And my fear is we've got, we have diversity that we should be celebrating, not suppressing. We have a lot of intelligent people that we should be lifting and not, again, trying to keep a thumb on them. There are so many areas that we have so much potential. But again, the 4 years under the Trump administration allowed certain actions, certain behaviors to be more acceptable in some communities. And as a state, we have to be purposeful to say, that's not us. That is not us. We are going to live together. We're going to work together. We're going to play together. We're going to respect each other. We're going to love one another. That's who we are. And we should be unapologetic about making sure that we are civil, that we are, approaching things with common sense, that it's about bipartisanship in the political space, but we should embrace our neighbors. We're never going to agree on everything. It's not going to be 100% we're going to agree with one another on every single issue, but we have to find some common ground for common good and get going in the right direction. I want to be top 5 in those rankings. I wanted to be the best state in all of those areas. And we can be, but it's all leadership. It is, and it's not just the top, and it's not just political leadership, it's community leadership, it's family leadership, it's employer leadership, it's across the board, but we've got to work together. Right now, everybody feels that they're not appreciated, that they're not respected, that they have no voice, and that can change. It's leadership.
All right, let's go ahead and get in. We have Anonymous has been holding. Anonymous, good evening.
Hi, Dr. McCormick. I have a question for you. In reality, it's going to be a major challenge to win this next year in order to do that, you're going to have to win over the independent voter. And I'm asking you, how are you going to do that? And I'll take it off the air. And thanks for your time.
Well, thank you for the question, Anonymous. Um, First of all, I know where I live. I know what this campaign means. I know the challenges and the opportunity associated with it. But I also know, too, that I'm going to run a really great race in which we are inclusive, in which we are going to all 92 counties, in which we are empowering Hoosiers to have a voice to help lead and guide our campaign, to help us formulate great policy, to make sure that we are opening our doors to whomever wants to listen and whomever wants to help. You know, we set a statewide record for individual donors in a set amount of time for first-time Democratic gubernatorial candidates. And I'm extremely proud of that because we had independents, we had obviously Democrats who donated, Republicans who donated, people who are libertarians donated, and I'm extremely proud of that. It's going to take all of us to work together to move things forward. I am also very proud to say, again, that 92 county approach that I've had a lot of people push back, that is important because every corner of the state has opinions. Every corner of the state has people who are concerned and frustrated. It's going to take a huge field operation that we're going to be dedicated to. It's going to take a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a path to victory, looking at the data, knowing where we need to carve out those votes. We have to have an aggressive get out the vote effort. We have to. But also, we've got to have help getting people registered and get them to the polls. We have to have help getting dollars to great candidates, not just my candidacy, but down the ballot and fill those ballots up with great candidates. We have to have an organizational plan as a party, which I'm happy to be part of, so that we are moving the needle. I got in this race and I don't plan to lose it. So when I win, we're all going to benefit. But I'm also going to benefit everyone down ballot, and everybody down ballot is going to benefit me. That's how we have to collectively look at it, as it's not about one race. It's about a lot of races. And we're going to get this done by being really smart and working with a lot of people from inside Indiana and outside Indiana to make sure we run the best campaign possible.
Well, we do have to get our final break in. Let's go ahead and do that. We got callers holding. We will pick you up after our commercial break. If you'd like to be part of our conversation with Democratic candidate for governor, Dr. Jennifer McCormick, you can call in to the radio station. That number is 317-239-1310. You can also comment in the Facebook feed. We've got some comments there in regards to some high school, some offerings in high school. I'm not sure if I get that. But we do have some comments there. Once again, you're listening to the Concerned Clergy Radio Show on AM 1310, 92.7 and 95.1 FM, The Light. Welcome back to the Concerned Clergy Radio Show. I'm Reverend Tony Alexander, and I've got the president with me, President Green. We've been joined by our guest tonight, which is a Democrat candidate for governor of Indiana. She's been sharing her vision and her thoughts. And if you'd like to be part of the conversation, have a question for our candidate, feel free to call into the radio station, 317-239-1310, or you can also comment in our Facebook feed. We do have a caller that has been holding. Let's go ahead and bring in Guy. Guy, good evening.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Congratulations, Dr. McCormick. I think you are the person we need to be the next governor of Indiana. And I wonder if you're familiar with Abram Shortridge and Caleb Mills.
Can you say the second name again?
Are you familiar with Abram Shortridge and Caleb Mills?
I am not.
They were the first promoters of the first public high school in Indiana, Shortridge High School. They were very instrumental in public education in Indiana. In fact, Caleb Mills constantly was involved with the General Assembly trying to urge legislators to do the right thing, so to speak. But we've come a long way since that time. And in my experience in the public school, there was once a PTA, and it seemed to be very effective, Parent Teachers Organization Association. It seemed to be very effective, and since we no longer have those, things have kind of gone off the tracks, in my opinion. What do you think?
All right, thank you for your phone call, Guy. Go right ahead, Dr. McCormick.
Thank you for your question. Yeah, schools do an amazing job at differing levels of trying to involve parents, and some are better than others. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There are some districts and some schools that do an amazing job, and others have some room to improve as far as how does that look and is it real organized. Many still do have PTOs. Sometimes it's not as well attended as it used to be even a decade ago, but there are other ways. We do a lot of home visiting, a lot of community events. We have a lot of community nights, family nights. I mean, schools do different things to try to involve families. It is not easy in some of our districts to get that family involvement, and our districts really try to do so, but I do hear you, and I'm not disagreeing that the family dynamics play a huge role in the success of each and every student. And obviously the community dynamics play a huge role. You know, right now when I'm out and about traveling the state, I hear a lot about safety in our communities and the frustration as far as where Indiana's going with some of those safety concerns. And those are the very issues that schools are having conversations with families about, you know, and trying to educate our families and listen to our families. And it's not perfect, but there are some layers still in place to involve the family.
Well, speaking on that level, if you will, family stability, one of the figures that came out this week also was 3% unemployment here in Indiana. And the last time I checked, Pastor, I saw that for African Americans, that figure was actually 9%. So we're seeing a 3 times difference when you're looking at unemployment from, our counterparts. When you look at like minority businesses that are starting and some of the hurdles that they have, where do you see at least what you and your administration, where do you see that you can spend an effort into closing that gap, or lowering the unemployment, as well as getting more African American business specifically that are up and running in the state of Indiana?
Yeah, I think we need to look at some of the models outside of Indiana that have been successful and learn from that. But also, in addition to the unemployment concerns, there's underemployment where we're not utilizing skills to the level we should be utilizing skills. The wage differentiation is it's real. People want to ignore it, but again, let's have an honest conversation. Or where are we with that wage differentiation? There are a lot of areas that we can improve upon, but that means bringing communities and community leaders, such as both of you, to the table to say, who do we need to bring to the table? What are the issues that our communities, our households are feeling? What do you need as small business owners in order to not only expand existing businesses, but bring in new businesses? What does that look like? And how, as a state, do we empower the local level to make sure we get that done? So much of it, people say it has to be done from the state level. Well, there's been a lot of success when we give funding and assistance to that local level so they can make some of those really needed decisions. But from the governor's office, again, it's bringing people to the table to have an honest conversation. I feel like there's so many, and I know I sound like a broken record on that, but there are so many concerns that could be solved if we would just bring people to the table and then give them the resources that are needed, making sure we're incentivizing to address some of the concerns that are real.
So, Dr. McCormick, I'm hearing that you wouldn't be against moving Hoosiers more towards livable wages.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, because I think that's just at the core of a lot of these issues is poverty, right? Whether it's the education or the other pieces, a lot of it is driven out of poverty. And so we're not going to be able to fix some of the issues we're seeing in terms of violence, education, or even healthcare and access to it if we don't address the poverty piece, which means people have to make and get closer to a livable wage. And because we're seeing prices increase for things, but wages don't increase to keep up. Therefore, we have certainly problems. Rents going up. We don't control the landlords who are out of the state, etc. So if we allow all those things to go on and not address the income, it creates problems. It's going, whether that's evictions, it's going to lead to instability. Even if it doesn't lead to crime, it leads to instability. When you have instability, children are impacted, families are impacted. So if we want growth and stability and not to be on the wrong end of a lot of these reports, we have to address that economic piece. So it's good to hear you share. And it's not one silver bullet. You can't, the governor, whoever the governor is, can't wave a wand. So it does take a collaborative effort.
And along with that, we've been having a lot of conversations with the unions because I organized, labor matters in not just, in everyone's wages. It raises everyone's. And so that's a piece of this too that is important in the conversation, whereas Indiana has really gone the extreme measures of making all unions the bad guy. And that's simply not the case. And making sure that we are again embracing the unions, empowering the unions in order to empower those who are making up our labor force. And I see it in education. I see it in industry. And, what they've done with trying to strip the rights of unions and the workers, as far as it's impacted safety, it's impacting the wages, it's impacting stability. And so making sure that we are having conversations with organized labor is incredibly important. And I've already started that. And again, I don't have all the answers to a lot of the issues that people are seeing in different pockets of the state. Some are the same and some are very different. But there are a lot of smart people who have some great ideas, but someone's got to listen to them, and someone then has to introduce policy that would help.
Well, Dr. McCormick, I do, before we do finish our time tonight, at least for the last couple of minutes, if there's something you want to make sure that you cover, that you have specifically, you want to make sure our community is made aware of. We really didn't get a chance to talk about housing. That's a huge issue for sure. Folks want to know what are we going to do here in Indiana in regards to housing. Also as well, if someone wants to be part of your campaign, how can they do that?
Yeah, the housing issue, I'm hearing that everywhere. And I'm hearing frustration, not just from families, but also from the employers. And we have to figure some things out collectively. And I know that there are a lot of conversations happening, but they cannot do this without in void of a state conversation. And again, local level, state level, we have to work together on many of these issues that we've talked about. We're going to continue to work hard. Our charge is for families. It's to empower Hoosiers. It's about excellence in government. It's about public servant. I am not a politician. I am the voice of the people. And that's always been me, someone who's approached it. And my family's always been in that same realm, that public service is why I do what I do, whether it's in education or whether I was at the state house. But empowerment of families is incredibly important, and we cannot do that in a silo. I can't win this campaign on my own. It's going to take all of us. McCormickforGov.com is our website. I am proud to say we already have 500 volunteers signed up from from all facets of Hoosiers. It's going to be a collective effort of bringing everybody together for the good of the cause. I obviously, it's not free to run a campaign. I certainly welcome any donations, no matter how big or how small. I welcome that, and I'm honored to take anyone who feels like they want to donate. Also, we have people that we're looking for to help us on those policy teams. We're starting to formulate those and come to the table. And there are a lot of smart people out there that have environmental knowledge, that have workforce knowledge, that have hey, I've got some ideas about some housing, and this has been my world for 30 years, and I'm willing to help. That's what it's going to take. But McCormickforGov.com, sign up to volunteer. We will reach out, donate, just stay informed. I mean, part of it is making sure we have informed voters. So, do your homework on candidates and make sure you know what you're voting for.
Thank you so much for joining us on tonight. Pastor, you have a final word?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I want to thank Dr. McCormick for coming and sharing with the community on tonight. I want to say to all the listeners, that's what's important. If you don't hear from the candidates and they're running for election, you're not going to be able to talk to them after they win. So and probably really important is we're at a crossroads. We're either going to stay on that worst list or we're going to change. And leadership is the only way to get there. And, I'm happy that Dr. McCormick has chosen to sacrifice a lot of time and energy to crisscross 92 counties to try to pull people together from all walks of life, a diverse campaign and approach, because she cares about the state. Because it's going to take a lot of work, and one person can't do it by themselves. So I encourage all the listeners, go to McCormick for gov.com. Check out that website. Be informed. We do need to go vote. If we sit back and don't go vote, then legislators are going to be talking about stuff that's not even relevant, most likely. If we want to see a change in that, we're going to have to go vote. Whether that's housing, whether it's education, whether it's economics, all these things matter, but none of it's going to happen if you don't have leadership at the top supporting it. You need leadership at the top. She has, I must commend Dr. McCormick. She's talked about doing it collaboratively. In all of her solutions, it was not about she was going to go do it. It was about how we were going to go do it. And Reverend Alexander, that's significant because we have to go do it together. But we have to get somebody elected to the top that embraces that, and that's where we all come together to make that happen. And Dr. McCormick, hopefully you'll be willing to come back again before November of 2024 and just kind of share with the community where you are, what's going on, and maybe talk about some of those things we didn't get to earlier. Recognize that because I guarantee you all the candidates do not want to come on the show and talk to the community. she's showing a willingness, an openness to come and do that. And everybody needs to make note of that as well. That you have a candidate who's willing to come and talk to the community, because every candidate doesn't do that. Many of them will hide behind their publications and what they send out and do a wave, but they don't want to talk to you.
All right. We'll be
All
sure to
right.
bring her back for sure. So we'll line
All
up a
right.
date for that. To our Radio 1 audience and everyone out in Facebook, we just want to say be blessed. Have a great evening.